want to go back to Jim Crane's introductory press conference with new Astros first baseman Jose Abreu a couple of weeks ago. Here is Jim Crane on where the Astros were at that point in time.
We're active. I mean, we'll stay active in the market. Certainly, Yurley's in the mix. As I mentioned before, Verlander's in the mix, and we're looking at other options. So we're not finished. We like our team with pitching strong. This adds another bat, but we think we can improve a little bit more.
We're not finished, okay? But we haven't seen anything take place since Jose Abreu was signed. We saw Justin Verlander leave for the New York Mets. We most recently saw yesterday Astros catcher Christian Vazquez, who was platooning with Martin Maldonado, sign with the Minnesota Twins. 3 years, $30 million. Perhaps a little more than you would be willing to give Christian Vazquez in terms of the total years, given that your top two positional player prospects, Yanir Diaz and Corey Lee, those two, you would like to see them get an opportunity this year. But the Astros were clearly trying to upgrade their catcher position. They were in the Vazquez sweepstakes. They were in on Wilson Contreras as well. They were supposedly interested in A's catcher Sean Murphy, who was just dealt to the Atlanta Braves Monday as part of a three-way deal that also involved the Brewers. It was a very strange trade, I guess, because Atlanta already had I think, decent catching situation. Whatever the case, there's some conversation that the Astros have began trade talks with Arizona about outfielder Dalton Varsho, but the asking price is a lot. And we're at a point right now where the Astros, I don't think that they are better going into 2023, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem, but there needs to be something else brought in, right? Are you totally confident in standing pat the rest of this offseason? Because it does feel like, as every single day goes by, that the chances of them bringing in somebody who's a legitimate difference maker shrinks and shrinks every day. And the Abreu move was a great one, at least for this year, hopefully for next year. You're feeling pretty good about Jose Abreu in the right now. But what's your depth behind Abreu? What is your outfield depth situation? Are you talking to anybody else? Or do you need to make a trade happen? A trade that could potentially mean you have to part ways with one of your starting pitchers, of which you have a lot of depth. And that depth is something that didn't bite the Astros in the tuchus last year. That injury bug never hit the Astros. There's reason to believe that their luck will not quite be the same. It's a 162-game season, and injuries do happen a lot in this sport. The odds of them going through it in the way that they were, I don't want to sound like I'm Brian Cashman here or the New York Yankees, but Cashman is right in that the Astros were more healthy than the Yankees going into that series. That's not why Houston won the series 4-0. Like, that's not the deciding factor. But Houston was healthy. So are they better? Are they the same? Or are they worse? I think they're slightly worse right now. And I say that because you'll lose Justin Verlander. And yeah, you brought in Jose Abreu, but you still have some questions about your outfield depth. And you have some questions about your catching depth too. Are those players, Corey Lee, Yanir Diaz, going to do what Jeremy Pena just did this past season? The odds are probably against it. Let's be honest. What else was Jim Crane thinking of doing? Because I know that now we walk ourselves into a conversation about whether or not the Astros do need to have a general manager at this point in time. At that Jose Abreu press conference, here's what Jim Crane said that the team was thinking about doing next.
I mean, we've got a few more holes. I would say we've got to look at the catching and maybe another outfielder. And, you never have enough pitching. So I think those are the spots that are fairly obvious.
The obvious spots, though, have not been addressed. And I like that the Astros are operating on a budget, but as we touched on yesterday, seeing all of these teams in the National League specifically make the moves that they are making makes you wonder about the Astros. Should they make it all the way through the American League to those World Series? Are they going to be on a level playing field? Philadelphia was not the best team in the National League last year. They got hot at a weird time. Honestly, an unexpected time, given that they had lost 13 of 20 to end the regular season. But you've seen the Padres be aggressive. You have seen the Phillies be aggressive. You have seen the Mets be aggressive. All three of those teams were players last season. There's no reason to expect otherwise next year. Atlanta, the Dodgers as well, are teams that you have to keep an eye on. The National League, a lot deeper. And look, good news for the Astros is that they're not in that National League. But how about the American League? Because we did see another move from a team that I, at the very least, think has a chance of being competitive with the Astros at some point. I don't know if it's this year. I don't know if it's next year. But the two teams that I think, if you're the Astros, you're looking over your heels at, or looking over your shoulder at, you don't look over your heels.
They're nipping at the Astros' heels.
Yes.
As the Astros are looking over their shoulder.
Correct, Sean. I appreciate that. The Blue Jays signed Chris Bassett, a 3-year, $63 million contract. So they added some pitching. The Mariners have been very aggressive this offseason. You've seen some of the trades that they've made. Teoscar Hernandez, they gave the extensions as well. Like they bring in Colton Wong. Those teams have added. And I'm not saying the Astros need to add for the sake of adding, but if Jim Crane is saying these are our next targets, and yet we have yet to see those other targets actually be addressed, I think it is something just to have in the back of your mind. So Astros are slightly worse right now. And with those teams in the American League nipping on their heels, adding some things, I think you have to wonder at what point will the Astros make that next move. And again, it's not about splashes. It is about bolstering your depth. Catcher, you don't have it. Outfield, you don't have it. And you do have it with your starting pitching at the very least, but you have less of it than you had last year. Let's go to the phones on the most interactive sports talk show in Houston, 713-780-3776. We've got Thomas. Thomas, what's going on?
What's going on, Paul? First
Yo.
off, shout out to Mike Leach. I always was a big fan of him back from Texas Tech. But regarding Astros, I think you can do like a spin zone either way. Just I think wherever you fall as an Astros fan, like wanting to go for back-to-back championships, and with the hype of all the signings that we're going to do, I think is a little bit of a letdown. But taking a step back and just seeing how everyone's trying to catch up to us, I think you can like not rest on your laurels, so to speak, but just say we do have depth. There are young guys where you can promote, and I mean I think it sounds like Brantley, as long as he passes physical, will join us back in March. And all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it is a letdown thinking like you're going to go sign a bunch of people, but looking at the roster, I mean, it is the championship roster. And, yeah, I mean, I'll hang up and listen.
All right. Thomas sounds pretty confident and pretty confident. I imagine most Astros fans are, and I'm also not telling you to panic right now. But to go to something that Thomas just said there, okay, Michael Brantley is somebody that you decide to bring back in March. Well, do you trust Michael Brantley to hold up for an entire season as he gets up there in age? I don't. Do you trust Yuli Gurriel to be someone that's available all season long as a backup for Jose Abreu, who, by the way, is also getting up there in age? Not for the whole season, I don't. I think you have to be realistic when you look at depth and when you have a bunch of guys that are in their mid to late 30s that you're going to have to manage them a little bit differently in the regular season. That could cost you a couple of games with all the scheduled off days that you give those players. I'm of the belief that there are too many scheduled off days across baseball, but I think that the Astros definitely look at it a little bit differently, and they want to make sure that they make this thing last as long as they possibly can. So you'll see off days for Jose Altuve. You'll see off days for Alex Bregman. You'll see off days for lots of players on this team. Yordan Alvarez will get the occasional off day as well. I would imagine Kyle Tucker will get the occasional off day too. Who do you have behind those guys? How do you feel about what you have behind those guys? Is David Hensley going to be able to take a big step forward? Like, who are we looking at to be the person that is reliable should things not go 100% swimmingly the way that they did for the Astros last year. I think that's something to wonder about. Not freaking out about it, but I do think the Astros are slightly worse right now.